Level 1. Civilian. You are boosting a Sultan out of La Mesa when a burner phone rings in the cup holder and a flat voice tells you to bring the car under the IAA tower. No cops, no detours, no Lester tricks. In the Pillbox Hill garage, men in gray put you against the trunk, search your socks, and march you upstairs without ever saying your name back to you. On the 36th floor, Agent ULP slides 2 folders across a glass table, your arrests in one and a blank federal oath in the other. In the basement range below Swiss Street, an instructor hands you a carbine, points at paper silhouettes, and says your score decides whether tonight ends with a badge or a ditch. On the roof facing the FIB building, ULP tells you the first rule is that the IAA does not trust rivals, allies, or freelancers, and tonight you count as all 3. In a ramen shop in Little Seoul, he makes you memorize a number off a napkin, then burns the napkin in soy sauce, and tells you to answer only if the caller says weather. At a payphone on Vespucci Boulevard, the number gives you your first task. Motel room in La Mesa, hard drive in the vent, no witnesses in the hall. You climb the exterior stairs, lift the vent cover, and hear a couple arguing in the next room while your hand closes on a laptop that feels heavier than the gun in your waistband. Back in the IAA garage, ULP never asks if you opened it, only whether anyone followed you. By sunrise on the Del Perro freeway, you understand the first rank in Black Ops is not agent, operative, or patriot. It is civilian, because the system wants you disposable before it ever lets you feel official. Level 2. Watcher. You start at IAA headquarters in a room with no windows, where ULP tells you soaring gas prices, dug-in money, and federal paranoia now count as your problem too. 10 minutes later in La Mesa, you are kneeling beside a signal van, hacking into an FIB drone feed while trucks scream past on Popular Street. In El Burro Heights, the drone catches another drone, and you tail both through alleys full of barking dogs and chain-link fences until one drops near a pink motel sign. Inside the Pink Cage Motel, you rip a laptop off a bedspread still warm from the last guest and find a bomb wired into a van key on the same table. At Cypress Flats, you cut traffic with the van half-armed and the laptop screaming in your ear, because the only safe place to defuse it is still 20 blocks away. In a storm ditch outside Gran Senora, you pull the panel open with bloody fingers while ULP counts seconds and tells you this is what passes for orientation now. The bomb stops at 3. The laptop opens to petrochemical spreadsheets, private emails, and proof that rich men in Los Santos can move markets faster than governments can move indictments. Back under the IAA building, ULP circles one figure on a printout and says watching is never passive. It is how the agency decides which lie gets hit next. By dawn on a Power Street parking deck, you are still looking through binoculars at windows that look empty until they move. That is rank 2. You stop seeing the city as roads and start seeing it as overlapping sightlines, each one hiding the next order. Level 3. Cutout. At Thompson's scrapyard, Agent 14 laughs at your haircut and says official agents leave patterns while freelancers leave receipts. You hand a classic sports car over to a female IAOA driver headed south, and Agent 14 tells you that if this job goes bad, nobody downtown has ever met you. At an LSIA service tunnel, a clerk with no name tag swaps your license for a passport under another name and tells you the cover job is consulting, which in Los Santos means nothing and opens most doors. In a Vespucci Canals apartment that was leased 3 years before you ever saw it, you find pressed shirts in your size, bills under your fake name, and a toothbrush already waiting by the sink. At a Pacific Bluff steakhouse, you spend 2 hours acting bored, while a Merriweather subcontractor gets drunk enough to brag about security routes around Humane Labs. In a Mirror Park laundromat at 1 a.m., you swap SIM cards with a woman who never looks up from her magazine and leaves you a key to cameras you will never sign for. On a Rockford Hills sidewalk, your real phone lights up with your sister's name, and you let it ring until the screen goes black. 5 minutes later, in a parking garage under Burton, Agent 14 takes the battery out, snaps the phone in half, and says, "Cover identities don't crack because enemies are smart." Outside Burton Station, he drops the pieces through a storm grate and tells you to buy the next phone under the fake name before sunrise. At a 24-hour pharmacy in Vespucci, you sign the receipt with a stranger's surname and realize level 3 is not learning to lie better. It is learning to live in places where the lie gets there first. Level 4, Entryman. Agent 14 briefs you in a downtown garage with key cards spread across the hood of a black SUV and says Humane Labs is either making something illegal or storing something worse. 40 minutes later in Del Perro, you are shoulder to shoulder with a chemist in a parking elevator, lifting his access fob while he argues into a Bluetooth headset about stock options. At a cove on the Pacific, a Valkyrie drops low enough to rattle the rocks in your crew boards without a word because rotor wash is louder than nerves. Over the ocean, Agent 14 reminds you that the agency loves science until the science leaks, then loves deniability more than the people cleaning it up. You hit the water off the humane coast in rebreathers, cut through intake grates, and come up inside a service tunnel that smells like bleach and wet concrete. In the lower lab, you pass glass chambers, dead fluorescent light, and one freezer room where every crate is sealed tighter than a confession. The man you corner by the server cage gives up a locker number before he gives up loyalty. You grab the sample, the drive, and the camera roll. Then the alarms start, and the clean corridor turns into the loudest hallway you have ever survived. At the Alamo Sea extraction point, your clothes are still dripping chemical water while Agent 14 checks the cooler and says the contents matter more than the bodies left below. On the highway back toward Los Santos, the skyline looks the same as it did that morning, which is the first hard lesson of the 4th rank. You can come out of a buried lab under armed fire with proof the government lied, and the city still opens its clubs on time. Level 5, Cleaner. You start in a sub-level briefing room under the IAA tower where Phoenicia Rackman tells you the dangerous part of an operation is not the breach. It is the paperwork left breathing afterward. An hour later on the unfinished floor of the Mile High Club, you are smashing a relay hub with a fire axe while dust blows through open concrete and a sniper watches the street below. At the Maibatsu factory in Cypress Flats, you ride a freight lift down beside engine casings to pull a guidance board out of a locked crate before a rival crew reaches the same floor. On Elysian Island, you chase the last courier through rusted catwalks, catch him between 2 fuel tanks, and burn the clone drives in a barrel before FIB sirens can turn the port road blue. In a storm drain under Strawberry, your team strips armor, wipes prints, and drops weapons into runoff that already smells like battery acid and dead fireworks. At an Amu Nation in Howick, you buy a legal shotgun with cash and a baseball cap because the cleanest way to hide a government gunfight in Los Santos is to make the next camera see civilian clutter. Back at the IAA elevators, Rackman reads the sanitized report, removes 2 names, changes 1 location, and calls the result accurate enough for oversight. On a red light at Alta and San Andreas, you look over at commuters checking phones and realize none of them will ever know how much history is decided by who gets to edit the last page. That is the 5th rank. You stop measuring success by what you stole or stopped. You measure it by whether the city can keep driving as if nothing happened. Level 6, Extractor. At the Court Center fountain, a field operative misses a dead drop by 12 minutes, which is how you know he is dead, grabbed, or quitting badly. In a Rockford Hills parking structure, you find his Granger stripped, 1 window starred, and a blood trail leading to a stairwell that exits toward the hills. On the observatory overlook, you spot 2 Merryweather SUVs crawling Mulholland in blackout spacing, and ULP tells you to follow without touching, which means this rescue already has politics inside it. In a scrapyard off Davis, you swap plates onto a box truck, cut through Chamberlain Hills, and let the city hide you long enough to get ahead of the convoy. At the Senora Wind Farm, the transfer goes bad before you even see the hostage, because 1 mercenary recognizes your driver from a job in North Yankton and starts shooting early. You drag the operative out of the 2nd vehicle, take 1 round through the vest, and half carry him across turbine shadows while the rotors above chop the desert into strobe light. In a trailer clinic outside Sandy Shores, a veterinarian with cash on his table digs fragments out of the man's shoulder and says he will live if nobody official asks for paperwork. At the Zancudo Perimeter Road, ULP meets you alone, takes the operative, leaves the body of your driver in the truck and says, "Extraction is never about bringing everyone back, only deciding who the system still has use for." On Route 68 heading south, that sentence sits in the cab with you longer than the smell of blood. By level 6, you are no longer scared of ambushes. You are scared of the part afterward where the agency explains which death was necessary. Level 7, handler. You stop kicking doors yourself in a bunker outside Grand Senora, where your job is to turn thieves, pilots, and hackers into a shape the IAA can point without claiming it. At Sandy Shores Airfield, you hand a washed-out crop duster pilot a route map in half in advance, then watch his hands stop shaking only when the cash touches them. In a textile loft near Mission Row, you buy 30 minutes of a hacker's time with agency money routed through 3 shell vendors and 1 nightclub. At a Del Perro marina, you lean on a yacht broker until he gives up docking schedules for a Duggan courier who thinks water counts as privacy. In the Diamond Casino parking garage, you trade clean plates to a triad driver for a route through East Vinewood that dodges every city camera you care about. At the Alamo Sea shoreline after midnight, your assembled crew hands you a satchel, 2 hard drives, a customs ledger, and 1 terrified accountant who thought oil money only bought politics. Back in the IAA basement, ULP looks over the table and says you finally understand Los Santos the way the agency understands it, not as departments, gangs, or districts, but as specialists waiting for a price. On a service elevator climbing toward legal affairs, you catch your reflection in polished metal and realize your jacket got cleaner the same week your hands got dirtier. In the legal affairs corridor, junior analysts peel your night into memos before the accountant's pulse has even settled. At the garage exit under Power Street, you hand your keys to a driver and understand rank 7. You arrange the city so other people do the worst parts and still answer to you when it goes bad. Level 8, Cell Chief. You enter through the satellite relay station in the Grand Senora Desert and ride an elevator down until the surface feels like somebody else's problem. In the underground server hall, feeds show port cranes, freeway readers, humane cams, and enough stolen signal to make Los Santos look like a nervous system. At a repeater shack near the wind farm, you test a 6-minute blackout that sends 1 convoy blind and 2 false patrols north. At Humane Labs, you cancel a raid from your tablet because FIB cruisers are already circling the fence, and pride is more expensive than delay. In an LS River tunnel, you meet 3 contractors after a job and realize one of them sold route data twice because only 1 question gets asked before shots start. At a safe house in Richmond, you change into a suit and arrive at a donor fundraiser with desert dust still in the seams while a councilman jokes about gas prices. Venetia Rackman joins you by the balcony and says Black Ops is mature when the city starts financing its own manipulation without noticing. Back in the command room after midnight, you sign off on payment to 1 widow, lies for 1 reporter, and a burial route for 1 contractor. In a records room off the command floor, a clerk shortens that same contractor's file before the blood on his boots dries anywhere official. In the elevator rising back toward the desert surface, you understand rank 8. The screens get brighter, the rooms get colder, and the people below start looking like moving parts unless you force yourself to remember their names. Level 9. Special projects. Rackman calls it a promotion in her glass office above downtown, which is how you know it is really a janitor job for disasters created by men with better titles. By noon in a foundry at Cypress Flats, you are supervising the seizure of Clifford hardware that should have been melted years ago and is somehow still warm from recent use. On an offshore barge beyond Elysian Island, you question a private contractor who sold the same guidance package to the IAA, Merriweather, and 1 buyer with no flag at all. At the Fort Zancudo fence line after sunset, Agent 14 takes the recovered crate, signs nothing, and tells you the military only hates the agency when the agency gets caught first. In the Vinewood morgue basement, a coroner opens a drawer on an operator whose fingerprints were scrubbed from every database before the body cooled. At a Chumash overlook, you dictate a version of events into a secure recorder that turns theft into interdiction, murder into loss, and panic into contained national interest. Back at the IAA building, the memo goes upward cleaner than the operation ever was. In a records annex 3 floors down, a typist turns the dead contractor into foreign facilitation, the missing crate into sensitive materiel, and the vanished operator into no one the pension office can find. At the secure archive cage, you sign the final page and understand rank 9 at last. You stop dealing in missions and start dealing in language. Language is the last weapon inside the system that never leaves a casing on the floor. Level 10. Director. You work above the city now, where the IAA tower looks straight across at the FIB building, and every morning starts with coffee, secure folders, and the knowledge that half your day is bureaucratic war dressed up as policy. In a conference room overlooking Power Street, you approve surveillance on a Port Union boss, kill a field op in Blaine County, and reroute $2 million into a shell vendor before lunch. At a City Hall garage, you trade careful sentences with men who campaign on law and fund chaos when it keeps markets stable. At a black tie event at the Court Center, you smile for photos beside donors whose companies sell armored glass, private fuel, and disaster logistics to the same agencies pretending to compete. On a port security boat near terminal, you watch containers get opened because a line in one report said, possible foreign materiel, and your signature made that vague enough to be useful. In a cremation room out in the county, a records officer feeds old personnel jackets into heat because the cleanest archive is sometimes no archive at all. Back on the 53rd floor, the city below looks organized, only because you know how much violence was required to fake that impression for one more day. In the executive washroom before the next briefing, you study your own face under white light and understand rank 10 at last. You have more access than anyone you used to fear, and less room than ever to tell yourself you are different from the machine you climbed. Level 11. Burn notice. It starts in the IAA lobby, where your badge chirps red at the gate, and the guard who used to salute you asks you to step aside without meeting your eyes. 2 blocks later on Swiss Street, an unmarked buffalo settles into your mirror and keeps the same distance through every light, which is how professionals tell other professionals the meeting is over. At a Davis evidence warehouse, you find your own shelves stripped, drives gone, and one safe hanging open like a mouth with all the teeth pulled. In a truck stop outside Harmony, ULP finally sits across from you in a booth and says a committee needs a name, a timeline, and one senior official who can absorb every ugly thing that was about to surface. Mine, you say. He doesn't answer because he doesn't have to. At an abandoned motel near Sandy Shores, you open a duffel left under a bedspread and find cash, a passport, painkillers, and a set of keys to a car you have never seen. On a turnout above Chumash, you watch 2 agency helicopters sweep the coast you used to command and understand the 11th rank in Black Ops is not power, status, or retirement. It is discovering the system only lets you reach the top, so it has farther to drop you when the paperwork needs blood. By the time the sun comes up over the Pacific, your phone, badge, pension file, and clearance are already becoming somebody else's version of events. Level 12. Ghost. You wake in a rented cabin outside Paleto Bay at 4 a.m. because rotor noise still feels like a summons when it's only news traffic overhead. At a flea market in Sandy Shores, you buy batteries with cash, keep your hood up, and hear 2 kids argue about heists, jetpacks, and whether the government knows anything. On the freeway south, the skyline comes back in pieces, Maze Bank first, then the FIB block, then the IAA tower standing beside it like 30 years never touched the glass. At a county incinerator in the desert, a clerk who never looks up feeds your personnel jacket into a drum because deniability does not retire. It gets heat-treated and boxed into ash. Later that afternoon in the same downtown lobby where yours died, a new freelancer hands over his phone, follows 2 gray suits to the elevator, and acts like he is choosing this. You watch from a bus stop across the street and want to yell, but traffic swallows the moment, so you keep driving. Past humane lights, relay dishes, wine farms, port cranes, and casino valets once the agency put a price on them. At a red light on Vespucci Boulevard, a burner phone starts ringing in the seat of the car behind you, and the freelancer at the wheel glances down exactly the way you once did. At the Del Perro Pier exit, you turn right, Leave him to it and understand the final rank. The ghost does not beat the system. The ghost only lives long enough to watch the city feed it another body. If you know Los Santos, you know why you keep driving. So drop a like, subscribe, or just keep moving.